black t-shirt like everything I've done so far.
TK, you look amazing, and it's good to
Yeah.
have you here. No problem.
I think
Listen,
it's gonna be my little mark.
it was great to see you this last weekend at the Praxis retreat. So I stumbled over to the small beach community, right, and we got the incoming class of the Praxis students there. I gave a talk. We did a hangout there, did some stuff. We got a chance to catch up. But I tell you, it was an amazing experience for me. I've written an article for the Freeman about it. This little conversation we're having will be posted alongside that article. I'm just crazy excited about what's going on there.
Hey, I'm crazy excited about it too. It was so good to have you out there, and I think we got a great class, for this fall. It's just a wonderful group of participants, and yeah, we're gonna change the world, man. We're gonna rock it. It's exciting.
Hey TK, you know, one of the things that's interesting about the class, you know, you know how when you hang out with a group of young people,
Hmm.
and there's always like one or two that sort of stand out and shine, you know.
Yeah,
So in this class, it's like every single one of them had their own kind of shine about them. Did you notice that? That you
I
know,
agree.
yeah, something special, like a unique something about them that made them really intriguing as individuals. Were you involved in the process of picking who was lucky enough to get into the program? Because not that many were accepted. I mean, a lot applied, and only about 10% were accepted. Were you involved in that process?
Yes, so I'm the first interview actually, and so I got a chance to sit down and talk with all of the participants that are currently in the program. And my interview is to sort of gauge what that curriculum experience would be like for them, and how conducive I think their set of skills and talents are to that, and to also sell them on the reasons why they might not want to do Praxis, to try to argue against the program to see if it's something that they've really thought about critically and that they really want to do. Because the last thing we want to do is be some desperate program that will take anyone, whether they're sure they want to do it or not, whether they're a good fit for it or not. Because one of our fundamental convictions is that if you can't look people in the eye and honestly say we're not for everyone, you shouldn't be trusted. And I don't care if you're Praxis, I don't care if you're college, I don't care if you're some kind of company. You should be able to recognize when something or someone is not a good fit for what it is you're doing. So that's sort of like how I evaluate when I talk. So I'm the first level actually, after the application and the whole resume. And you could pick any one of these participants from this class, and I could just go on forever about what I thought when I first interviewed them, and how excited I am about that particular person and what I think they're going to be great at. So it's going to be fun to see it all unfold experientially, though.
So I guess I don't know. Are these in-person interviews, or do you do Google Hangouts with them?
We do it via Skype or Google Hangout. Sometimes when we have tech issues, if the person can't do it, I may do it on the phone, but I prefer to do it by Skype or Google Hangout. That way we get to see them, we get to have body language, and all of those other elements that are going to be critical when they have to go out and do an interview in the real world. We want to see that kind of stuff too.
Well, let's just be clear what a kind of a mold-breaking program this is. It's a one-year college replacement. So in the course of this year, you're doing an apprenticeship of sorts with a commercial company. It could be anywhere in the country. Typically, it's in a field you're interested in, and it's more or less a full-time job. And at the same time, you're getting a kind of a super compressed liberal arts curriculum that you study on the side, and you're evaluated according to how you handle that. This is like a 4-year program all put into 1 year together with commercial experience, and it's intended as a kind of college replacement, although not always used as that. So this is a pretty radical sort of idea.
Absolutely, and I would say it's a heck of a lot more than just having a full-time job while taking a few courses online. You're going to get more out of this experience than a full-time job, because a full-time job is you get what you get, right? Like they hire you based on a set of expectations. You bring the skills, and either you cut it or you don't, and either you're in or you're out. Well, what we do is we have an existing Rolodex of business partners who work with us, and we pair participants up with business partners that they might not otherwise be able to work with had they not gone through us. But more importantly than that is they not only work with these business partners, but they are being trained by those business owners or by the management team to learn how to think like an entrepreneur within the context of that field, and just approaching their professional life in general from that vantage point. So there's a lot of mentorship going on. There's a lot of guidance going on. They also have a project that they create while they're in the program. there's a huge emphasis on learning how to create value for the company they work with, as opposed to just doing the day in, day out, clock in, clock out routine that even many adults do. So it's a lot more than that. It's very demanding. And when they come home at the end of the night, they're going to feel like they've worked, because they are going there to not just, show up, but they're going there to be challenged to become better and better at creating value. So it's a pretty awesome program. I'm super excited about it.
So what I stumbled into was the first retreat of the second incoming class. Am I correct?
Right.
So they met each other for the first time at this gathering.
They met each other for the first time at this gathering. Now, there has been some online interaction, so we have a private Facebook group for each Praxis class, and once a participant is accepted into the program, we add them into the private Facebook group, and there's a lot of interaction that we have with each other several months before we have the opening seminar. So I'm in there every week, and Isaac is in there every week sharing some kind of resource, posting a blog post, or putting up a discussion question, and we all sort of talk about it. Interaction isn't mandatory, but it provides us a way to all interact with each other, learn new things, and discuss cool things. So before we even get to the opening seminar, there's been a substantial amount of conversation about entrepreneurial ideas. But it's really exciting, because once we go to that seminar, that's when we all see each other in the flesh for the first time, and we can have group activities, and we can interact with different entrepreneurs and speakers. So it's very exciting to have that.
I've had a lot of time to think about the diversity of students that I encountered, and it's quite shocking. Like every individual is really, really different, but there's something special about each of them. So just to name a few things, I mean, just in terms of religion, there's some that are very religious, some that are just completely non-religious, some that are vaguely anti-religious, right? And so they're kind of put into this mix, and they have to kind of learn to appreciate each other's point of view and still hold on to their own point of view while civilly engaging the others. And it's not just religion. I mean, it's demographics. It's all over the place. It's you have
we have an equal amount of females and males in this class.
Yeah, right. And you've got people that are interested in sports, others that are interested in engineering. Some people are intrigued by the counterculture. Others are very, very mainstream. But every single here's the thing, TK, that I was trying to figure out, what is the unifying characteristic of all these kids? And I thought that the number one thing that stood out that they all had in common was like a passionate curiosity and a real desire to learn and discover. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a very important point, because there are certain demographics that get stereotyped. Almost every group has a tendency to see themselves as sort of like the persecuted group of independent thinkers, while everyone else belongs to the category of sheeple. So if you're talking to an atheist, they may tend to dismiss the religious as being a bunch of people who just place blind faith in what their priests or pastors tell them. If you talk to a religious person, they may see themselves as being the ones that are thinking independently as they attempt to mold their minds after the thought patterns of the divine, and everyone else is just sort of believing whatever Sam Harris and things like that. But
right.
I think this group has all the participants are very critical thinkers. In fact, on the first day at lunch, there was a pretty exciting debate between a born-again Christian and a Randian atheist on the existence of God, and they were having a very spirited debate. And I sat there and I watched it and I allowed it to happen, and it was very respectful, very friendly, and at the end of the discussion, neither one of them changed the other's mind, but they thanked the other for participating in the discussion in such a respectful way, and they said, we look forward to more. And I think that kind of diversity is so important, because what we have a tendency to do is to try to protect people from it. You get two people in a room arguing about anything, the first thing we do is we say, hey, easy everyone, easy. Let's all find something we can agree on, because we don't want to be destroyed by confronting diversity. But it's only through confronting that kind of diversity with confidence and with the sense of composure that you can actually develop the kind of critical thinking skills that are necessary for developing a successful life or a fulfilling life. In fact, one of my old philosophy professors used to say, critical thinking can't be taught, it has to be caught. And you can only catch it by actually engaging in discussion with people who think very differently than you.
Yeah, what an educational experience. You know, there was a funny thing that happened that night when we were sitting around in the bonfire. I was going on about various aspects of because there's a few people there that are interested in Ayn Rand, so I was going on and praising her life and telling some people things that they didn't know about her, you know. But then I said in passing something like, yeah, but some aspects of her philosophy seem to be a little, you know, non-substantive to me, like, you know, this claim that existence exists, I don't know. That seems too question-begging to me. And immediately, like, I had 4 students, like, glued onto me. And they're, like, criticizing me, going, oh, yeah? Well, what do you mean by that? And kept digging deeper and deeper. Well, TK, my thought wasn't actually all that deep, right?
Right,
right. So I found like, they're kind of, like, digging, finding out, you know, like, where my brain was going with this. And I quickly ran out of ideas, you know. It turns out they're like extremely sophisticated on all these topics, and I was like, "Whoa, just settle down here."
And you know, I would say this group will do that to you on any topic. In fact, the first night by the bonfire, we were having a discussion on writing, and a couple of them were asking me some questions because I did an experiment where for 3 years I decided to blog every day, and I didn't miss a day. And so they were asking me questions about that and about writing, and like I think the first piece of advice I got, you know, I just thought it would be like, oh, wow, thank you, that's very insightful. Oh, no, they challenged me right away, and they were like, but aren't you contradicting yourself when you say this or that? And I was like, oh, my gosh, this is great.
I know exactly what you mean.
Great, yeah.
It requires a lot of energy. I mean, like, you got to be on your toes around these people.
Absolutely.
You know, another thing I think people would be interested in, the thing I was interested in, there's a couple other things. One is that almost every participant in the program has had some kind of prior commercial experience. Is that something you look for in applicants?
We do, and we look for evidence that the participant has the ability to take initiative, to make themselves useful, to make themselves productive, to get involved in the creative process when they're not being told what to do, when they're not being made to do it. And that can take a variety of forms. I mean, we prefer them to have some commercial experience, but that can take the form of doing a lot of volunteer work. I recently interviewed a participant who in 1 semester in college took 18 credit hours, volunteered to be the treasurer for their fraternity, also volunteered for 3 other organizations, spent 2 to 3 hours a week on Code Academy, taught themselves Spanish. You know, so that's not commercial activity, but that's the kind of stuff you need to do to demonstrate that, you know, you're a self-determined individual who can make yourself useful and creative even when someone is, you know, making you do it. Yeah, so I do look for those qualities.
And all over the place. I mean, there's the one gentleman who's like the arm wrestling champion, you know, regional arm wrestling champion of somewhere, I don't know, the Northeast or something. Nicest guy. He texted me, by the way, after the thing and said, thank you so much for coming and giving such that lecture, which I was then so impressed that he looked me up and went out of his way to write me a note. And then other people are just, everybody's interesting, you know, and a lot of it came out in the speeches. And let me just say something about this, because I was only there like an afternoon and a morning, right? But in that time, in that short period of time, people had experiences that you almost don't get in college, but that you should get, right? So you had them gave them 15 minutes to come up with a business idea, present it, and then it was directly critiqued on the spot by the faculty, which was great. They had to prepare speeches that were between 3 and 5 minutes each, and then each one was critiqued by other students. I mean, TK, this is gold, right? I mean, these kinds of experiences are amazing.
Absolute gold. And then to be able to interact with different entrepreneurs, not just professors of entrepreneurship, but people that have built successful businesses from the ground up multiple times, to be able to connect with those people and have those people say to you, hey, here's my email address, email me anytime, you know, I'll answer any questions. And that's an experience that's going to continue. So for instance, every week we have group discussions via Skype or Google Hangout or Zoom, where all of the participants and myself, we get together and we discuss the ideas that are in the curriculum. And we don't just discuss them from the standpoint of appreciating T.S. Eliot's ideas on religion or Aristotle's views on metaphysics in a purely abstract sense, but we also discuss these issues in the sense of, hey, how can I use these ideas to become a better professional, to become a better person, to move myself closer towards my goals? And we have a lot of entrepreneurs who join us for these discussions as well, to be able to challenge them in that way and answer questions about their work experience and their curriculum experience. So it's something that we want to keep going beyond the opening seminar.
And I thought some of those speeches that I heard that day were incredible. Some of them I was able to give critiques on the way they're holding their hands or putting their feet, or some of their vocal inflections and things. But then others were the content was so riveting that I forgot to critique the speech. And there's one that almost brought me to tears, and some of them were so revealing. Like the story of the guy whose parents wouldn't let him ever have a gun, like a Nerf gun, or draw pictures of guns or anything, and then he's gradually working himself into his interest in guns, and then creatively figures out a way to hack a Nerf gun, and then he begins to sell them, the hacked guns, to his friends, and now he's interested in gun manufacturing. There was just so many stories like that. One thing I don't think we've mentioned, I meant to mention earlier. So it's really diverse where they are in their lives, right? So you've got some people are just like right out of high school, but I would say very mature right out of high school, but that never bothered with college. Others are graduates of college, very nice degrees, nice universities, but feel themselves really unprepared for the commercial world. And others, were in college like a year or two or three, and just said, this just isn't working for me. It's not. I don't see the future here, and they dropped and embraced Praxis. They all have different reasons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you have some who they graduate college, they enjoy their college experience, but it is what it is. There are things that it does well. There are things that it's just not designed to do well. Like anything, everything has something that it does. Everything has something that it's simply not designed to do. And there are some people who say, hey, look, I need some sort of program that's going to help facilitate my transition into the real world by giving me the sorts of experiences and the kind of mentorship and the kind of academic training that will help me think and act in the way I need to think and act to be successful, to be what Seth Godin calls a linchpin in the workplace, or to be an entrepreneurial thinker in whatever it is I do. So, yeah, you have a very diverse group, and we did sort of begin this with an effort to kind of challenge a lot of the traditional, conventional assumptions around how people ought to be educated, but we make it a point to leave it up to the students to decide what they want their relationship to college will be. It's not my place to tell someone that they shouldn't go. It's certainly not my place to tell someone that they should go. There's no one shoe that fits for everyone, right?
It's conceivable a person could go through a year of praxis and then decide, hey, I think I'm going to take my exams and go to college now. That's entirely possible too. So I've been calling it a college replacement, but that's not really true. It's more like a, how would you say, a post-secondary 1-year college-like program, something like that.
Absolutely. And now, a couple of things here. First, there are some participants in the program now, and I've interviewed several in the past few weeks, who have made up their mind they want to go to college, but they want to do this as a way of differentiating themselves or developing skills that they know they won't be able to get there. And then I would say, yeah, as far as like the replacement thing, there's a lot of things college does that we can't replace. Like, for instance, we don't provide you with the campus with the coolest parties in the world, and we don't have a football team. So there are some things you can get from college that you can't get from Praxis. I'm working on a Praxis football team, but we don't have one just yet. So we're not a replacement, but.
I think the first thing you need is an arm wrestling team. Praxis will move up. On the curriculum point, before the first class entered, Isaac had approached me about doing the history and culture curriculum, and it was a good time in my life. I had a little bit of space, so what I mapped out was a kind of a 1-year curriculum in history and in culture that I think would be the dream curriculum, right? It's like all the cool stuff you want to know. The history stuff begins at the beginning of time, basically, and comes all the way up, and with a special focus on the late Middle Ages, which is something I'm very interested in, and then all the way up to modern times with the emphasis on technology. It's not a history of states and wars, it's more of a history of life and commerce. And then the culture stuff, I had a special emphasis there too, reflecting my own interest. And I was so pleased that I heard several participants last year say that they loved the history and culture curriculum. That was really great. But I had to leave the retreat during the time you had just sort of begun your curriculum lecture, and I was really sad about that, but I just had to get back. Can you tell me what went on in your lecture, and then what was the response to it?
Absolutely. Well, to follow up on what you just said about the history and culture module, and we're in such gratitude to you for, the work you did on that. One of the best pieces of advice I received was from Philip Daniels, who said, in the course of your lifetime, read 1,000 biographies, because in doing so, you'll build a vast vocabulary for overcoming incredible odds. That's something that always remained with me. And I feel like history is one of the best ways to go about doing that. But so much of the conventional approach to history, as you stated, revolves around, studying the history of political achievement or political failure, the history of what politicians did and how the world reacted to that and how politicians reacted to that. And we put an emphasis on the history of entrepreneurship, the history of innovation, the history of things that have affected that and been affected by that. And we're really equipping those participants with things both biographical and beyond that will sort of help them think in that way, that they'll need to think when they encounter failures in their own life. But, the sort of stuff that I talked about when I did the lecture on the curriculum is I talked about the goal of it and how the goal of the curriculum, you have two things going on. You have a lot of interaction with abstract ideas that have no immediate, obvious application to things like becoming a better professional. So, for instance, anyone who's ever taken a course in Western analytic philosophy, you're going to encounter some very strange, far-out ideas. Like, for instance, does the physical world exist independently of the individual's ability to perceive it? Or is this all some sort of mass hallucination? Are we like brains in a vat, a la Descartes skepticism? And when you interact with ideas like this, it can seem a bit strange, like, hey, we're really going far out. But there is a value in going far out, because it's only by asking questions that everyday life doesn't force you to ask that you really stretch your thinking and elevate your ability to go places in mind that are absolutely necessary to be able to think creatively. One of the things you talked about in your lecture was that creativity can be learned. It can be triggered. You can learn how to make unconventional connections and associations and juxtapositions. Well, the only way you do that is by interacting with the strange and the familiar. But then there's also the pragmatic component as well, where we not only interact with these strange, far-out ideas, but we interact with ideas that are going to help us to actually solve problems, how to create more harmonious relationships in the workplace, how to resolve conflict, how to please customers, how to solve problems. So we want to emphasize both of those things. And a lot of people come into the program and they think, oh, so it's all entrepreneurial, so I'm just going to be reading a bunch of self-help books. I'm just going to be reading Tony Robbins. And it's not like that at all. You're going to be studying some hardcore history, hardcore philosophy, some serious business, some serious economics. We're going to hit the abstract and the practical all at once. So I emphasize that a lot and talk about many different things that I won't go on right now.
Now, how do you do about evaluation? Am I right that I'd recommend to Isaac when this thing began that you'd stick with oral examinations? Is that what you've done?
That is what we've done, because we want to eliminate the distinction between knowing your stuff and being a good test taker. And one of the best ways to do that is to evaluate knowledge in a context where knowledge can only be demonstrated by the ability to articulate it, concisely and compellingly and critically. And this is the way that the real world demands us to demonstrate our knowledge. Like, what does it really mean if you know your stuff, but you just have no way of demonstrating it? I understand that in terms of personal fulfillment, that might mean something. But in a world where your economic value, your success in relationships is determined by your capacity to create value and solve problems, at some point you have to develop the ability to step up and demonstrate knowledge. So what we do in our exams is it's me and another professor in that field. We evaluate them on what I call the 3 C's. The 3 C's are content, engagement, communication, and critical thinking. Content engagement, how much evidence do they show that they're actually engaging the content and they have the ability to summarize what they've read? So if I ask them about a book, they can sort of tell me what kind of experience I would expect to have if I read that book. Like, they're capable of writing an Amazon review on it. Communication, the ability to articulate what you think, maintain composure, be clear, be concise, the kinds of things you'll need if you're at a job interview, the kinds of things you'll need if you're working in sales. And then critical thinking, how well can you answer questions that you're not prepared to answer, that you didn't know you were going to be asked? The art of impromptu questions. And how well can you illustrate the ideas we study using examples from the workplace? How well can you apply the ideas that we study to your own professional goals?
Yeah.
So, these exams are not like, hey, everyone, here's what's going to be on the test. So if you know this and you recite this back to me, then you'll be fine. It's, no, everything that you study is fair game, and we're going to ask you all sorts of questions about it, and you're going to be evaluated not only on what you know, but on how confident you can be on selling your ideas, and how much you can demonstrate a capacity to think for yourself. So some of the exams will even involve arguing. I'll say, okay, look, I'm going to present an argument for or against the position you pick. You want me to present an argument for or against it? And they'll pick, and then I'll give an argument, and we'll go at it for a few minutes. And I just want to see how good they are at having their ideas criticized and coming back and defending themselves and asking questions about another position, all of these sorts of things. So it's a very dynamic experience. But I want it to feel like we're getting together in a coffee shop, and we're going to talk ideas. This is not a punitive sort of thing,
Had you ever done any oral examinations before? Is this your first time?
It's interesting because in college I studied Western analytic philosophy, but I had an intense interest in religion because I have a religious background. My father is a pastor, but our philosophy course didn't offer any of that, and I was really good friends with the chairman of the department in religion, and so he allowed me to tack on a double major in comparative religion, take a lot of independent studies where I just pick what books I wanted to read, and my exams were I would just meet up with him every week, and we'd talk about whatever I was studying for a couple of hours, and he just challenged me, and we just go back and forth. So I had a lot of experience in that in college, and I'm lucky enough to have a professor that allowed me to do that for a lot of courses.
I find that these oral examinations are very, very revealing. Like, you just can't fake it, so they're hard in a different way from regular examinations. I'm also trying to think about the life of a Praxis student when they're away from the retreat. So they're often a community they've never really been before. They may or may not have friends. Of course, with social networking, they can make them. But they're pretty darn busy. So they've got a big work schedule, and then they've got this rigorous curriculum that they're completing on the side, and probably have regular Google Hangouts and progress reports and that sort of thing. What have you heard from participants so far, and how their experiences are, on the ground, where they actually get into the apprenticeships and start their curriculum? What have the reports been like?
That it's more challenging and rewarding than they could have imagined. One of the interesting things that have come up that we didn't even think about going into the program, but our first group of participants made us aware of it, is in the real world, one of the biggest differences between the real world and college, unless you work at a college or you work in school, is that you don't get all of these arbitrary or seasonal breaks from work. So, for instance, if you're in college, when the holidays come along, you just have like a 3-week break, whether you earned it or not, because of the time of the year it is. Or when February, March, or April comes along, you just kind of get like 2 weeks to go with your friends to Florida or Hawaii. You get a break from work. You get those types of breaks are built into the calendar just because of the day it is. But in the real world, when you've got people investing in your business, or when you have customers who are demanding things of you, or when you just have a regular job, the majority of hardworking Americans have to show up. And holidays are even more difficult because you have to work even harder because you have all of these other stressful factors. Yeah. Customers want to buy more during the holidays. So that's one of the real challenges that, it's just kind of hard to imagine. So it's more challenging than they ever thought. Also, it requires a lot of self-discipline. There is no professor who's saying, this is mandatory, that is mandatory. There is no one, playing the parental role and lording over them. You have to want it. And if you spend too many nights coming home after a hard day's work, and you say, oh, I don't want to study, I'll get to this in a couple of days. I got through my whole college career doing that kind of stuff. You can get through it like that because everything is stretched out. But in Praxis, you have 3.5 weeks to get through a tremendous amount of material. And if you have 1 or 2 days where you just decide to take it easy, that curriculum will bury you. It's very difficult to catch up and stay on top of things. So it's more difficult than anyone thought. And it's also more rewarding because a lot of people come into the program thinking like, oh, okay, I'm just going to pay you guys to go work a job, and they don't understand that they're doing a lot more than going to work a job. This is a
Well, the
real
other thing,
apprenticeship.
TK, it occurred to me actually, is because I began to recognize that this would be a pretty wild and crazy year for anybody. But what's nice about it, it seems to me, is that it's only a year. It's very difficult for people to think like 4 years out, like in college. It's like 4 years is a long time, but 1 year, the human mind, can conceive of. It's like, okay, this is hard. This is taking a lot of time. This is really engaging, and I'm pretty exhausted. On the other hand, if I get through this year, I'm fixed up for life. That's kind of a nice thing to be able to think about on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, absolutely. I like to think about things in terms of, all right, what's the worst case scenario of doing this program? Let's just assume, as much as I hate to even entertain this possibility, let's just assume that after 10 months you feel like this was the dumbest program I've ever done. What is the worst case scenario in that situation? Well, you either have zero debt or very little debt, because the program pays for itself as far as tuition costs are concerned. We have scholarships available to help people with cost of living. So the most debt a person can possibly incur is the debt that comes from like cost of living. So just very little debt, if any at all. You've just spent 10 months getting valuable work experience and valuable mentorship. You've created a project in the meantime. You've learned an awful lot of stuff that's going to be very valuable to you, and you've given 10 months of your life for that to walk away with not only those experiences, but with a portfolio where someone who is an entrepreneur has vetted you as someone that's shown up to their company every day. They've been mentored by you. They've created value for you. You have other professors signing off that you've demonstrated competence or excellence in these various subjects, let alone, the experience as well. I mean, it's just such tremendous value. There are so many ways that we waste our time without being skeptical about it. In fact, I always tell people, like, I love it when people are skeptical and ask skeptical questions about the program, because it gives us the opportunity to not only answer those questions, but to also challenge people to be skeptical about some other things by applying those same questions to all the different ways we waste time and waste money in everyday life. I mean, think about all the people who just pour money down the drain, going to college, not because the university is bad. So I don't want to hear anybody tell me, TK, you're saying false information by saying the university is bad. No. I'm talking about students who make the choice to go to university for poor reasons. Think about all the people who just go to college for 2 years, no idea what they want to do, and they're just discovering themselves and experimenting. Nothing's wrong with experimenting, but they take oceanography, they take anthropology, a bunch of stuff that they don't want to use, and then their third year they discover, okay, here's what I want to do, and that's great that they have that self-knowledge. But how much debt has been accumulated just in that process of self-discovery?
You spent $100,000 on 2 years of self-discovery, basically. I mean, that can happen. It's amazing. So it's been very interesting for me to watch from the very beginning of this program, because when I talked to Arthur about it, it was, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like this. And it's one thing to hear something as an idea, and I remember thinking it sounded like a good idea, but sometimes I had a hard time imagining what it would look like. It's in that sense, it's a little bit like my own business, Liberty.me. I would explain it to people, and they go, well, I kind of get it, but I'm not sure I understand what it looks like. And,
right.
But it was a little that way for me when Praxis. But then once I saw it in operation, I'm telling you, TK, it was, and I wrote this in my article. It was, you look at it in operation, and you're like, why hasn't this always existed? Like, why did we have to wait until 2013 to see this born? I mean, it's so inevitable and so Absolutely. Wonderful, that it just seems like it should have already happened. But I guess that's the way visionary entrepreneurship is. That's the way great new institutions are created. Somebody's willing to take the risk. There's others who have the courage to step out there and, as your slogan says, break the mold.
Absolutely. And I think the sign of a good idea is that you'll have a buddy that says to you, man, I thought of that, or shouldn't that have been, already done? Like, don't we all have a buddy who created eBay before they came up with eBay? don't we all have a good friend who created YouTube before they came up with it? Like, that's what good ideas ought to do. They ought to resonate with us intuitively and say, we should have had that a long time ago. In fact, I created something like that when I was 5, But I also think there's something interesting about the time we live in, and the way in which technology is making people accessible to us in ways that were not otherwise possible. You know, like we've always had conversations, we've always done interviews, but oh my gosh, look at what Google Hangout is doing to change the game, right? So I think the tools are making it right. I think it's much easier than ever to execute on an idea like this.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the only thing that occurred to me after I left is that look, I mean, TK, we both know what's going to happen, right? I mean, you know, next year your applications are going to double, triple, quadruple. The next year after that, it's going to be exponential. The problem you're going to face is going to be containing its growth, it seems to me. So I would just say about these lucky few that are here in the early days that they have made a very good choice. They're very, very fortunate. And you know what? I think they all know that. I got that strong sense.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to put myself in that category with them and say that I too am lucky to be, you know, working with such brilliant people and being a part of their entrepreneurial and philosophical journey. Because one day when they're out there changing the world in their own way, I can say, hey, I got a chance to talk philosophy with that guy, or hey, I got a chance to discuss history and culture with her. You know, I was a part of that. So, you know, that's a prize for me.
I almost said in my article that this is forming a new generation of leaders, and I resisted saying that because the point isn't to be a leader. The point is just to simply be great. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. You know, I've always believed that a true leader is someone who works very hard at eliminating their necessity, you know? Using your authority to convince other people that the greatest authority comes from within, the authority of their own bliss, their own judgment.
Well, you know, TK, all these students are very lucky to have you as a mentor. I'm lucky to have you as a friend, and I'm thrilled to be involved with Praxis. Thank you, and congratulations for all you're doing. I look forward to visiting with you more in the future.
Hey, likewise. Thank you so much.
Okay, you take care, my friend.
You too. Just go on forever about what I thought when I first interviewed them and how excited I am about that particular person and what I think they're going to be great at. So it's going to be fun to see it all unfold experientially, though.
So I guess I don't know. Are these in-person interviews, or do you do Google Hangouts with them?
We do it via Skype or Google Hangout. Sometimes when we have tech issues, if the person can't do it, I may do it on the phone, but I prefer to do it by Skype or Google Hangout. That way we get to see them. We get to have body language and all of those other elements that are going to be critical when they have to go out and do an interview in the real world. We want to see that kind of stuff too.
Well, let's just be clear what a kind of a mold-breaking program this is. It's a one-year college replacement. So in the course of this year, you're doing an apprenticeship of sorts with a commercial company. It could be anywhere in the country. Typically, it's in a field you're interested in, and it's more or less a full-time job. And at the same time, you're getting a kind of super compressed liberal arts curriculum that you study on the side, and you're evaluated according to how you handle that. It's like a 4-year program all put into 1 year together with commercial experience, and it's intended as a kind of college replacement, although not always used as that. So this is a pretty radical sort of idea.
Absolutely, and I would say it's a heck of a lot more than just having a full-time job while taking a few courses online. You're going to get more out of this experience than a full-time job, because a full-time job is you get what you get, right? Like they hire you based on a set of expectations. You bring the skills, and either you cut it or you don't, and either you're in or you're out. Well, what we do is we have an existing black T-shirt, like everything I've done so far.
TK, you look amazing, and it's good to have you here. No problem. Listen, it was really
my little mark.
It was great to see you this last weekend at the Praxis retreat. So I stumbled over to the small beach community, right, and we got the incoming class of the Praxis students there. I gave a talk. We did a hangout there, did some stuff. We got a chance to catch up. But I tell you, it was an amazing experience for me. I've written an article for the Freeman about it. This little conversation we're having will be posted alongside that article. I'm just crazy excited about what's going on there.
Hey, I'm crazy excited about it too. It was so good to have you out there, and I think we got a great class, you know, for this fall. It's just a wonderful group of participants, and yeah, we're gonna change the world, man. We're gonna rock it. It's exciting.
Hey, TK, you know, one of the things that's interesting about the class, you know,
their set of skills and talents are to that, and to also sell them on the reasons why they might not want to do Praxis, to try to argue against the program to see if it's something that they've really thought about critically and that they really want to do. Because the last thing we want to do is be some desperate program that will take anyone, whether they're sure they want to do it or not, whether they're a good fit for it or not, because one of our fundamental convictions is that if you can't look people in the eye and honestly say we're not for everyone, you shouldn't be trusted. And I don't care if you're Praxis, I don't care if you're college, I don't care if you're some kind of company. You know, you should be able to recognize when something or someone is not a good fit for what it is you're doing. So that's sort of like how I evaluate when I talk. So I'm the first level, actually, after the application and the whole resume. And you could pick any one of these participants from this class, and I could just...
When you hang out with a group of young people, and there's always like one or two that sort of stand out and shine, you know?
Yeah.
So in this class, it's like every single one of them had their own kind of shine about them. Did you notice that?
I agree.
Yeah, something special, like a unique something about them that made them really intriguing as individuals. Were you involved in the process of picking who was lucky enough to get into the program? Because not that many were accepted. I mean, a lot applied, and only about 10% were accepted. Were you involved in that process?
Yes, so I'm the first interview, actually, and so I got a chance to sit down and talk with all of the participants that are currently in the program. And, you know, my interview is to sort of gauge what that curriculum experience would be like for them and how conducive I think